June 1944. Somewhere in France, a German officer stands on the edge of a hedgerow field, hands on his hips, jaw tight, listening. He doesn't like what he's hearing, because what he's hearing doesn't make sense. It's not tank treads, it's not artillery, it's not planes overhead, it's not even infantry boots. It sounds like thunder at ground level. Fast, close, too close. And then, seconds later, his forward line goes silent. He turns to the radio operator and barks, "Report!" Nothing. He calls again. Nothing. No one is answering from the forward positions. Men he's known for 2 years, gone quiet in under 5 seconds. That's impossible, he thinks. That's not how an attack works. This isn't how Americans fight. Not this fast. Not this clean. Not like that. He has just met the weapon his commanders have been underestimating for 2 years. And by the time he understands it, it's already tearing his defenses apart. Because this isn't about a single gun, or a single plane, or a single tank. This is about something much bigger. Something the Americans brought to the war that Germany did not see in time. A weapon Germany did not take seriously until it was already too late to stop it. The weapon was the American logistics machine. Stay with me. You're about to see why that doesn't sound dramatic, and why it quietly decided who won. Because here's something most war stories don't tell you. The scariest thing about the Americans in World War II was not just what they could shoot, it was how fast they could show up, hit you, disappear, and then hit you again, harder, with replacements, fuel, food, ammo, radios, spare parts, bulldozers, medics, engineers, maps, and coffee. Like they had an endless pocket. The Germans thought they understood war. They had the best tanks, they said. They had experienced infantry, they said. They had veterans who'd fought in Poland, in France, in North Africa, in Russia. They believed combat power was about sharpness, force of impact, the single decisive blow. They were fighting the last war, speed, shock, breakthrough. The Americans were fighting the next war, pressure, endless pressure. Let's start where that pressure became impossible to ignore. Normandy, summer, 1944. Everyone remembers D-Day like a door being kicked open. But the real story, the terrifying story, from the German point of view, is what happened after the door was already open. Because most invading armies in history get one good punch. They land. They hold what they can grab. Then usually they need time. Time to breathe. Time to reorganize. Time to bring up fresh men and supplies. Time to even figure out where they are. The U.S. Army looked at that old rule and said, no, we're not doing that. We're not pausing. Instead, as soon as they were ashore, they did something the Germans weren't prepared for. They kept coming, and coming, and coming. Wave after wave after wave after wave. Infantry, engineers, armor, field kitchens, fuel trucks, radios, bulldozers, mobile surgical units, replacement riflemen, replacement tank crews, replacement everything. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't elegant, but it was relentless. German officers on the ground wrote about it later in tones that weren't angry. They were almost offended. They said things like, every time we destroyed an American unit, another one appeared. Intact, supplied, rested, with tanks, with air support. And that isn't bravado. That's shock. That's someone explaining that the rules of the fight just changed without asking his permission. Because here was the true American weapon. Systems, not just bravery, not just firepower. Systems. Let me make that real. We're going to zoom in on one field, one day, near St. Lo. Normandy hedgerow country. Tall earth banks, thick hedges that act like walls. Perfect German defensive terrain. One American infantry company is pinned down. Mortars and machine guns are chewing them apart. In a normal army, here's what happens next. They call for artillery support. Maybe they get it. Maybe they don't. If they get it, maybe it's on target. Maybe it's not. Then after the barrage, they go forward, slow, and pray. Here's what the Americans do instead. Step 1. The platoon leader on the ground gets on his radio. His radio, not someone else's, not a shared asset, and calls immediate fire. Step 2, a forward observer, already in position, already mapped, already trained on that specific kind of hedgerow terrain, relays exact coordinates, not guesses. Step 3, American artillery, not one gun, but multiple batteries, responds fast, accurately, with ridiculous volume. Shells hit close, danger close, on purpose. Step 4, while that's happening, a bulldozer is literally pushing through a hedgerow to make a new vehicle path, because American engineers have been told, if the terrain slows tanks, change the terrain. Step 5, a Sherman tank noses through that new gap 20 minutes later. 20 minutes, in hedgerow country, and it's not alone. Step 6, infantry moves behind the tank instead of in front of it. The tank soaks up the opening fire. The infantry cleans out what's left. Step 7, the company that was pinned down 40 minutes ago, they're moving, they're advancing, they're alive. And if they take losses, and they do, because this is still war, replacements are already en route with ammunition, water, plasma, bandages, morphine, rations, dry socks, and a chaplain. That whole chain, the radio net, the artillery response, the engineers on standby, the tank arriving on command, the resupply at speed, that's the weapon. That doesn't happen by accident. That has to exist before the battle starts. And that's what crushed German expectations. Because look at it from their side. They're used to being the fast ones. They're used to cutting through slower, less organized enemies. Now suddenly they're the ones reacting. They're the ones behind. And every time they think, good, we've stalled them here, the Americans don't stall. They flex around. They punch somewhere new, with fresh men, fresh fuel, fresh steel. That is not how the German army understood war in 1940, but it's exactly how the American army will fight in 1944 and 1945. And it is devastating. Now, you might hear that and think, okay, so the real weapon is just numbers. More men, more tanks, more trucks, more stuff. Number. It's not more. It's more delivered. Lots of armies in history had numbers. What America built was delivery. Fast delivery. Predictable delivery. Replace it today delivery. I'll prove it to you. Let's talk about something unbelievably boring that terrified German generals once they understood it. The Red Ball Express. If you've never heard that name before, remember it, because this is honestly one of the most important combat systems of the entire war, and barely anyone outside military history nerds ever talks about it. Here's the situation. Summer 1944. The breakout from Normandy finally happens. Operation Cobra. The hedgerows crack. American armor pours through the German line. And suddenly the whole front doesn't look like a wall anymore. It looks like an open zipper. Now this is the part where, historically, attackers slow down. Why? Because you outrun your own fuel. Your tanks are fast, yes, but your gas is sitting in cans on a beach. Your food is sitting in crates on a ship. Your ammo is in a depot 80 miles behind you. That's the point in a campaign where even a beaten defender can sometimes turn and hit you hard, because you physically can't keep moving. The Americans looked at that problem and said, okay, so let's just invent a highway that didn't exist yesterday. And they did. The Red Ball Express was a non-stop convoy system. Convoy as in thousands of trucks running 24 hours a day on dedicated routes, guarded, prioritized, refueled, repaired on the fly, driver swapped, constantly loaded and unloaded, just hurling gas, ammo, spare parts, rations, medical supplies, radio batteries, even socks and cigarettes from the beaches to the front lines, faster than any army had ever been supplied over land in modern war. And here's the thing that really made German intelligence go cold when they finally saw it. Most of those drivers were very young. Many of them were Black American soldiers serving in segregated transport units. Men the army at that time still wouldn't allow to command white troops in combat, but would absolutely trust to keep the entire invasion of Western Europe alive by keeping its tanks fed. And they did. They drove in blackout conditions, through wrecked roads, through mud, through sniper zones, with trucks so overloaded they rode like boats in a storm, and they did it constantly. That constant, that never stop, that if your truck dies on the road, someone will pull you out of the line, patch you, push you back in, and the line will not stop moving. Energy. That is logistics as weapon. That is why American armored divisions could break out of Normandy and not stall. That's why they could surround entire German corps that were still trying to regroup. That's why German units suddenly found the Americans not where they should be, but miles deeper than they had any right to be 24 hours after contact. It's not that American tanks were invincible. They weren't. The Sherman was not a magical superweapon. It's that American tanks were there, all the time, over and over, with gas in them, with fresh crews if needed, with artillery following them, with radios working, with food in the back for the infantry. You can't plan for that if you've never seen it in the field, and the Germans hadn't. Not at that scale, not with that coordination, not with that speed. By the time they understood what they were facing, the damage was already done. Let's bring it back to the ground, to something human. You're a German squad leader in France. You've been told, the Americans are soft. They're spoiled. They're poorly led. They don't like getting dirty. They're not used to hardship. You believe this. You've believed it since Italy, since North Africa, since the propaganda films back home. Now you're in a sunken lane, dug in, and you see Americans advancing. You open fire, they hit the ground. You're feeling good. You're thinking, here we go. They'll back off now. They'll wait. They'll regroup. We've seen this before, except they don't back off. Instead, within minutes, you're getting hit with artillery so precisely targeted, it's like they just drew a red X on your head. You move to a new position to avoid the shells, and there's already a tank coming through a gap in a hedgerow that wasn't there half an hour ago. You fall back again and run straight into fresh American infantry you haven't seen before. Like they're spawning out of the trees. You keep falling back, and now you're under fighter-bomber attack because the Americans called in air support, and the pilot is on station 10 minutes after they asked. It feels less like a battle and more like a machine folding in around you from every direction. That is an incredibly demoralizing way to fight. It is exhausting. It creates panic. It breaks what soldiers need most to keep resisting, which is the sense that they can predict what happens next. If you don't know what happens next, you can't plan. If you can't plan, you can't counterpunch. If you can't counterpunch, you just get pushed. And pushed, and pushed, until you're done. That's what the Americans did in 1944. They didn't just punch hard, they punched nonstop. And that nonstop is what Germany misread. Because Germany, especially early in the war, lived on the myth of the decisive strike. One armored thrust, perfectly timed, led by elite troops, breaking the enemy's line and collapsing his will. That's how they tore through Poland. That's how they shocked France. It's how they got deep into Russia before winter and reality hit them in the face. It's what they believed war was supposed to look like. A knife. The Americans didn't bring a knife. They brought a grinder that never shut off. A grinder fed by ships, ports, cranes, trucks, rail lines, field depots, repair crews, clerks, engineers, medics, radio techs, code talkers, cooks, mechanics, drivers, map makers, and 19-year-olds with wrenches who could get a tank back in the fight in hours instead of days. Imagine watching that happen to your front line in real time. Imagine realizing, too late, that you're not fighting a soft army. You're fighting an industrial organism. That's the moment German officers started writing phrases like, "They attack at all hours," and "Their artillery answers instantly," and "We destroy one battalion, and by evening, we are facing a new battalion in the same position with equal strength." That's not whining. That's respect, edged with fear. Now let's talk about air, because air is part of this same weapon. By 1944, American fighters and fighter bombers owned the daytime sky over Western Europe. Owned it. German units moved in daylight at their own risk. Road convoys, targets rail cars, targets armored columns trying to reinforce the front. Targets even trying to reposition a reserve became a nightmare, because the moment you started moving in any kind of strength, Somebody saw you. Somebody marked you. And within an hour, and sometimes less, there was a P-47 Thunderbolt overhead, dropping bombs, firing rockets, chewing you apart. That doesn't just slow you down. It stops you. It pins you in place. It means when you get the order, counterattack immediately, you have to answer, we can't. We'll be annihilated on the road before we even get there. Again, that's not a story about a single plane. That's a story about the system behind the plane. Fuel to keep it flying, ground crews to keep it serviceable, a radio net that can pass target coordinates from some muddy lieutenant in a hedgerow to a cockpit at 8,000 feet in under 15 minutes. Replacement parts arriving daily. Pilots who can sleep, eat, rearm, refuel, and get back up. Do you see the pattern? It's all the same weapon. It's not glamorous. It doesn't go on a poster, but it breaks empires. Now, let's walk forward to the last act of this. Because what happens when your enemy finally understands what you are? Here's what happened in late 44 and early 45. German units, even elite ones, begin surrendering in larger groups. Not everywhere, not instantly. The German army fights hard, brutal, stubborn, right up until the end. But you see more moments where an officer looks around and says, "We're cut off. We're out of fuel. There's no relief coming. We're being shelled. We're being strafed. We're facing fresh American units on three sides. I can keep my men dying in this pocket, or I can lay it down." That decision is not just about honor, belief, or ideology. It's math. And the math is American. Because here's the truth. A lot of German soldiers on the Western Front in 1944 to 45 didn't surrender because they suddenly agreed with American ideals. They surrendered because they were rational. They saw an enemy that could keep bringing new force to the same point, faster than they could rotate in defense. They saw a machine that could absorb losses and not slow down. They saw a fist that never got tired. That's terrifying. So when we say the American weapon the Germans didn't understand until it was too late, we're not talking about a secret gun. We're not talking about a wonder tank. We're not even talking about the atomic bomb. That's later. We're talking about a way of fighting, an approach, a mindset. Hit hard, yes, but more importantly, never stop. If a unit gets chewed up, replace it. Today. If a Sherman gets hit, recover it, patch it, send it back. Today. If a road is blocked, don't wait for a map to tell you a new route. Bulldoze a new route. Today. If fuel is 80 miles behind you, build a rolling highway and bring it forward. Today. If artillery is needed, answer in minutes. Today. If wounded men are bleeding out, helicopter them. No, wait, this is 1944. We don't have helicopters yet. Drive them in a dedicated ambulance that's already staged with plasma bags ready. Today. No waiting. No pausing. No, we'll regroup and hit them next week. Today. You can call that arrogance, or you can call it industrial war at full power. Either way, by the time the Wehrmacht understood it, they were already on the back foot, falling, and they weren't getting back up. Let's pick it up right there, because I want you to feel the moment it actually clicks for the German side. Not in a classroom, not in a war diary written months later. I mean in real time. Late summer, 1944, France. The German command structure in the West is already bleeding. They're low on fuel, low on trucks, low on functioning armor, low on sleep. They're trying to form what's left of multiple divisions into something that looks like a line. But here's the problem. Lines make sense on maps. Maps lie. On the ground, their line is actually isolated knots of resistance. A few tanks here, a battered company there, a headquarters radio truck working off a car battery in a barn somewhere. And into that chaos walk the Americans. Not tentatively, not like guests. They move like owners. They're not just breaking through, they're flowing. We say breakthrough like it's a single punch. That's not what was happening anymore. It wasn't punch and pause, it was punch and pour. Any hole that opened, and hundreds were opening, the Americans just flooded into it. Tanks, half-tracks, rifles, Jeep-mounted machine guns, field kitchens, fuel Bowsers, medics, radio jeeps with antennas that look like fishing poles, military police already waving traffic like this is a highway and not a war zone. And that right there, that last thing, weirdly, that's where some German officers started to understand just how much trouble they were in. Because imagine this from your side. You're retreating. You're trying desperately to reposition east, to link up with someone who says they still have armor, to escape an encirclement that may already exist, but no one will admit is real yet. You look down a country road you were planning to use, and it's already under American traffic control. Not American tanks, American traffic control, like it's rush hour and not combat. Like this is already theirs, like you're trespassing. There's a true story from the breakout where a German column, still technically combat capable, tries to move cross-country to avoid getting cut off. And they literally cross an American resupply convoy in motion, not even fully armored, just trucks and fuel and spare parts, calmly blasting forward under orders. What does that tell you? It tells you the Americans aren't just ahead of your front. They're ahead of your retreat. They're already behind you, feeding themselves. They've wrapped around the position you thought was holding. That means you're not fighting at the edge anymore. You're in the bag. Even if you're still shooting, you're in the bag. That is when morale starts to snap. Not at the first shot, at the part where you realize there's no way out. Now for the Americans, this is not magic. It's not luck. It's what happens when you mass-produce speed. Let's talk about that for a second. Because speed in war is not just how fast a tank can go or how fast a plane can fly. Speed is, how fast can you recover from something going wrong? That's the kind of speed that wins campaigns. Here's an example. Two Shermans push up a narrow French road. The lead Sherman takes a hit. Panzerfaust, short range, German infantry who know what they're doing. Boom. The Sherman is smoking. Crew is rattled. Track is damaged. The tank can't move. In most armies, that road is now blocked. That whole advance? Delayed maybe all day. You've got to pull back, clear the wreck, try again, lose tempo, give the enemy time to reorganize. Not with the Americans. With the Americans, here is how that scene is supposed to go. Step 1, crew bails out if they're still alive. Medics get them immediately. That's its own system. Combat medics trained to sprint under fire, jam a bandage into a wound, jab morphine, drag a man clear, tag him so the next medic knows what was done. Step 2, a recovery vehicle. A dedicated armored wrecker, not we'll figure something out later, but a vehicle whose entire job is dragging dead tanks out of the way under fire, is already in the column. It rumbles up. Step 3, they hook cables. They yank the damaged Sherman off the road. We're talking minutes, not hours. Step 4, a reserve Sherman, because yes, they brought extras, rolls forward and literally takes the position the burned tank just had. The line keeps moving. The attack keeps moving. The Germans don't get that hour to breathe, to reset, to lay mines, to get new anti-tank teams in place. They get nothing. They get hit again, right now. That is what speed really is. It's not that you don't take losses. You absolutely take losses. It's that your losses don't stop you. And this, over and over, is what German units started reporting with this kind of disbelief, like, we hit them hard. They did not slow down. We hit them again. They did not slow down. And there's something else in those reports that matters. Respect. You start to hear respect. Late 44, early 45, German officers who had spent the whole war building their identity around elite status. We are the best trained, we are the hardest, we are the ones who know how to fight. Now writing things like, the American artillery is immediate, the American air cover is constant, the Americans replace losses very quickly, the Americans seem to have endless material, and then, the one that keeps showing up, the Americans are unshaken. Not unskilled, not reckless, unshaken. That might be the scariest word in those sentences, because unshaken means you're trying to rattle them and it's not working. It means a psychological playbook that worked in 1940 is failing in 1944. And if your psychological playbook fails, your mythology fails. And when your mythology fails, your army, which has been leaning on that mythology for 5 years, starts to crack. Let me pause and stress this. Germany didn't just lose because of tanks versus tanks. Germany lost because the story Germany told itself about how war works stopped matching what it was seeing. That is brutal. Now let's zoom into fall 1944, the Falaise pocket, the dash across France, the race to the German border. German command is yelling, hold, regroup, counterattack. But counterattack with what becomes a real question. A division on paper might be 15,000 men. In reality, after weeks of being hammered from the ground and air, that division might be 2,000 tired survivors and whatever vehicles they could keep running on scavenged fuel. Meanwhile, facing them, fresh American regiments rotating in with hot meals on the truck, artillery that hasn't run out of shells, anti-tank guns that haven't run out of barrels, forward air controllers with working radios, infantry who have slept in the last 24 hours. Fuel, water, dry socks. That last detail matters more than you think. Because here's where we get to the deeply uncinematic truth. Comfort is a weapon. Not luxury, not softness. Comfort. Dry socks, hot food, coffee, medical treatment within the golden hour. Things that keep a human fighting. Things that keep a human thinking clearly. Things that keep a human from flipping into panic or resignation. The American system understood that, and it weaponized it. Every time a U.S. unit pulled back, even briefly, there was this massive, almost industrial act of reset them, feed them, warm them, patch them, swap their boots, swap their radio batteries, replace their BAR gunner, replace their squad leader if he's down, get them a map update, get them updated intel, get them back, fast. Every hour spent down was focused on putting them up again. And when you can do that in hours instead of days, you get something terrifying. Consistent aggression, not suicidal aggression, calm, repeatable aggression. The kind that says, we're going to take that crossroads. We're going to take that farm. We're going to take that bridge. We're going to take that rail line. We're going to take that town. We're going to keep pushing. And tomorrow we're going to do it again. That wears on you if you're defending. Now make no mistake, the German army did not just sit there and fold. They adapted. They learned to dig into towns and force brutal house-to-house fights. They learned to lay ambushes with anti-tank weapons at close range. They learned to mine the roads the Americans were using. They absolutely made the U.S. pay for every mile, especially as the front approached Germany itself. But here's the thing that never changed after Normandy. Once the Americans started moving, Germany never got the initiative back in the West. Not for long, not sustainably. There were local counterattacks, there were scary moments, and there was one last big swing, the Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge. We have to talk about that because it's the perfect test of everything we've just said. December 1944, Hitler throws what's left of his strategic reserve, armor, men, fuel, his last roll of the dice, into the Ardennes forest in terrible winter weather under cloud cover that grounds most Allied aircraft. He's betting on surprise. He's betting on shock. He's betting on the old playbook. Break through fast, split the enemy, take Antwerp, shatter their supply, force a negotiated peace in the West so he can turn fully back east. It is desperate. It is reckless. And for a few terrifying days, it works. German armored spearheads punch through thin American defensive lines. Some U.S. units get mauled. Some are surrounded. Some are annihilated. Headlines back home scream. Commanders panic. But then something happens. Something that did not happen to France in 1940. Something that did not happen to the Soviets in 1941. The American line bends hard, but it doesn't snap. Small units hold crossroads that are supposed to fall. Company-sized groups of Americans dig in at road junctions and fight like division headquarters depends on them. Because it does. Truck drivers and cooks get handed rifles and told, Your infantry now. Hold this roadblock. Engineers blow bridges in the faces of Panthers, not in theory, but with tanks already in sight, taking fire. Artillery officers pull their guns out of formal positions and fire point blank like giant shotguns into oncoming armor. And behind that front, behind that chaos, the American logistics machine does something absolutely wild. It turns around, immediately. In cold, in snow, in mud, under fire. Fuel is rerouted. Ammo is rerouted. Medical units are rerouted. Truck convoys do 20-hour days on icy roads to keep battered frontline units alive. Not next month, not next week, tonight. And within days, the counterattack begins. Fresh U.S. divisions slam into the German spearheads. The weather clears. American air power returns like a hammer. And all that German armor that lunged forward suddenly can't move because it's out of fuel, out of resupply, surrounded by an enemy that can move and can resupply and is now grinding them from both sides. That is the moment the German high command finally, fully, completely understands. We cannot win in the West. Why? Because even our last best punch, even our all-in, could not destroy their ability to absorb, react, and hit back fast. This is the brutal truth of the Battle of the Bulge. It is remembered as a heroic stand, and it was, but it is also proof of system superiority. The German attack had shock. The American response had depth. Depth wins long wars. And now we're at the ending. Because I told you this wasn't going to be a story about a secret wonder weapon. It's about a way of fighting. Let's zoom out just for a moment to see the full shape. On paper, the American weapon the Germans didn't understand until it was too late looks boring. It's fuel delivery, it's spare parts, it's radios that actually work, it's artillery that answers in minutes, not hours. It's medics who reach you before you bleed out. It's engineers who change terrain instead of accepting it. It's trucks that run 24/7. It's a tank getting dragged off a road in 5 minutes so the attack doesn't stop. It's coffee, dry socks, hot food. It's a private with a map who knows exactly where he is. It's a lieutenant with a radio who can talk to planes. It's a captain who can say, I need 2 bulldozers and a bridge section right now, and actually get them. It's a colonel who can say, replace that entire company, and actually mean replace, not write their names in black ink and pretend they're still there. And most of all, it's the promise, backed up again and again in blood, fuel, and steel, that the pressure on the enemy will not stop. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not next week, not until you break. Germany in 1940 could break other nations with shock. America in 1944 to 45 could break Germany with pressure. Slow, heavy, constant, merciless pressure. You can argue about whose tanks were better. You can argue about whose infantry training was better. You can argue about doctrine and leadership and tactics and morale. But in the end, on the ground, in the mud, in the cold, here's what the German survivors told us. We ran out, they didn't. That's not a slogan, that's a eulogy. So when you hear people talk about the American war machine, and you picture factories and assembly lines and mountains of crates and endless trucks stretching over the horizon, good, keep that picture. Because that was the weapon. That was the thing the Germans thought they could outthink, outdiscipline, outfight. And for a while, they believed it. They believed their experience, their shock tactics, their armor quality, their fieldcraft would make up for the fact that the Americans had more. But they misunderstood. It wasn't just more. It was more, delivered right now, again after you thought you killed it, and again after you thought you stopped it, and again after you thought you broke it, until finally, you realize you're not fighting an army anymore. You're fighting a system, and you can outshoot a man. You cannot outshoot a system that never stops arriving. That was the American weapon the Germans didn't understand until it was too late. It didn't wear a medal. It didn't have a nickname. It didn't get put on a recruitment poster. But it walked across France, pushed through the Siegfried Line, crossed the Rhine, and did not stop walking until the shooting stopped. It's easy now to make that sound inevitable. It wasn't. It had to be built. It had to be protected. It had to be paid for in advance by factories and steel workers and welders and machinists and farmers and sailors and truck drivers, and then paid for again in blood by teenage riflemen in wet foxholes who only kept moving forward because someone brought them dry socks and hot chow and artillery that answered when they called. That's what scared Germany in the end. Not the first American punch, the fact that the punch never ended. So the next time someone tries to sell you World War II as a story of a single hero with a rifle, or a single tank on a hill, or a single ace in a plane, remember this. Sometimes the hero is the convoy at 3 a.m. Sometimes the hero is the mechanic under a tank in the rain. Sometimes the hero is the radio net that works. Sometimes the hero is just a truck full of fuel that makes it through. Because without that, the line stops. And if the line stops, the enemy breathes. And if the enemy breathes, the enemy plans. And if the enemy plans, the enemy might win. But if the line never stops, then one day your enemy, an enemy that once scared the entire world, looks at you, looks at what you're still bringing to the fight after months of nonstop pressure, and quietly says, "We're done." That's the moment wars actually end. Not with a flag on a building, with a tired man in a ruined field realizing that nothing he does now will change what's coming next. He unclips his helmet, he raises his hands, he walks toward the men who never stopped arriving. And that is when the story's over.